welcome back to the Laura Show. I am here with Lexi Miles Corrin. A long and beautiful name. Lexi, thank you for joining me.
I had to include my husband's in there.
Oh, well,
I didn't want to get rid of mine.
You know, I'm glad we're already starting off on this topic. So it's funny. When I was a kid, I thought, there's no way I'm ever going to take my husband's name.
Same.
My maiden name's Laura Stewart. I thought it was a great,
It is.
unique name. No one else ever had it. And then for some reason, just to be different, like all my friends were kind of keeping their names when they got married, and I just have this weird thing of doing the opposite of what everyone else is doing. So then I took my husband's name, so now it's Laura Stewart, but now I can't get a URL for anything, or a handle on TikTok or Instagram or nothing. It's taken, so now I have to be some long-winded name, but I could have had all the LauraTucci.coms in the world.
Or now you could do Laura Tucci Stewart.
I know, but I can't go through that legal process.
Honestly, it is a nightmare. And
it's a nightmare.
So I changed my name on my license and health card to Lexi Corrin.
Yes.
And I didn't have Miles in there. And I, like, a 1-year wedding anniversary, I surprised my husband with it. And he was like, oh, that's so nice. Like, didn't really care, but it's cute. You know,
Yeah.
Anyways, fast forward, my passport was still Lexi Miles, and it was a whole mess. I can't take my kids anywhere because they're foreign. Yes. I have 4 kids. Like, what are we going to do? Anyways, just last week I was in the line at the service center for like over an hour.
Just to finalize it all.
Finalize it all. To get it all.
Have you had to vote yet? Because I still have problems with voting.
Yes.
I don't know. Every time I get a voter card, I think it's because the title of my home is under my maiden name. That's still, and every time I go, I fill out this form and it takes extra steps and they're like, now next time you won't have this problem. Next time I always have the problem.
I just thought during COVID they would have figured out online how to update this stuff, but anyway.
Anyway, well, kudos to women because the amount of shit that we got to go through just to change a freaking name for some archaic idea. But I do agree, now that most of my friends have kids, they then realize they did have to change their names because of the hassle, right? And what is the hassle around that? Like, do they not let you travel if you don't have the same last name? Is that what it is?
You have to have like a letter and notarized letter and all of the things. So
it's crazy. Now, what if their kids' names were hyphenated? Would that matter? Do you know?
Yeah, I think then you'd be able to travel.
Oh,
but I didn't give my kids Miles Corrin.
Right, of course. Shit. Well, we're getting right into it. So you are the owner and founder of WAXON, which is correct me, like a laser hair removal.
Yeah, we do
service.
Basically, every hair removal needs
all the hairs.
All the hairs.
All the hairs
through laser or waxing services.
Okay, and how many stores are we up to, or franchises, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we're a combination. So I had 6 corporate locations that I own. That's a corporate location, so I started myself, and then now I've franchised the rest, and we just opened our 19th.
19?
Yeah, this week, on Friday, less than a week ago, and that was our 5th location this year.
That's so exciting. Okay, we have a lot to unpack.
Yes.
But I just want to ask you a quick question because I hadn't really heard of WAXON before. I actually don't wax.
All right. Well,
so I'm gonna learn all the fun things about this, and everyone's gonna wax, and we're gonna learn it all. But so it doesn't like come into my peripheral, right?
Yeah.
But I happened to be at York Mills and Leslie the other day.
So I'm heading right after this.
Okay, and I'm sitting there. Me and my husband, I think we were going to the Longos, and I'm like, WAXON. I'm like, I'm having the owner of WAXON on my podcast. So now I'm gonna, of course, see that everywhere. Is that a franchise or is that a corporate?
It is a franchise.
Awesome.
They opened just under a year ago. I have wanted to open that location for like 7 years myself, and now we have an amazing franchise partner there. And she's awesome.
So cool.
She's a mom of 2 and just like super inspiring.
Okay, take me back. When did you decide that you wanted to start your own company?
Yeah, so I was actually a management consultant. I traveled all the time for work, mostly to the U.S. And so I was the type of person, because I have been waxing like for a long time, that I would end up in like the seedy nail salons because it was fast, it was cheap, and super convenient.
Right.
And it was a nightmare. Like, it's behind the shower curtain, and it's just not an experience that you want to leave to the most intimate of areas.
Got it. Okay. Although people do.
All the time.
All the time.
And then, so I've owned WAXON for 11 years now.
Okay.
And back then, really there wasn't specialized services. Like, now everything is specialized. You really can go and get anything done. You know, you have a place for your lashes, you have a place for your nails.
That's true, actually.
Wax.
But you're right. Back in the day, it really was like you go to the nail salon, and you're right. Like sometimes it'd be like, okay, like we're gonna have somewhat privacy over here,
Exactly.
right? So you were doing that, and you just thought there was like a hole in the market, like
yeah, exactly. And I was in the States a lot, saw these wax bars popping up, and I thought like this is a brilliant concept. And in Canada, there really wasn't anything like it at the time. So I started to like dive deeper into the ins and outs, and I was a management consultant. I was attracted to just the business model first.
Okay.
I'm like, this just makes sense. Like, how much can wax cost?
Right.
The margins in this must be amazing.
Yeah.
Once I started to get into it and opened our first location, and I'll say like with the goal of, I thought, okay, I'm going to open a location and then I'm going to franchise it and I'll have 100 locations in 5 years.
All right.
Like, just like
that.
Simple.
So yes. I love big audacious dreams.
Yes.
Big hairy audacious goals.
Yes.
No pun intended.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
You know, I think
hairy.
yeah, real hairy. You know, it's good to start a company and assume that you're going to make it huge, because if you don't believe in yourself, then certainly the world's not going to do that for you.
100%.
But the irony is, of course, when you start, you're like, holy shit, this is way harder than I
insane.
probably thought it was going to be, right?
And also, like, I'm not an esthetician. Like, who was I to be sitting there being like, all right, here we go. Like, let's, get into training and all of the unknowns, which when you're starting your own business, I can say that, like, the one most overwhelming thing is by the end when I was opening the doors, I think someone went to ask me, like, should I put this bottle here? And I was like, I can't answer another question. Like, please, I'm done.
Decision fatigue.
Total decision fatigue.
Yeah.
But yeah, and here we are now. So we have 19 locations. It was our biggest growth year to date, opening 5, and we're opening 10 next year.
Wow.
And just starting
It's
really
interesting. I've been going through the process of looking at my own company that just started 5 months ago now. And usually, like, the reason companies start are kind of always kind of a funny story, right? It's not like someone's sitting there with some massive idea. But ironically, you want to make sure that if you are starting a brand new company, like, look at the marketplace first.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you saw, yes, there's an opportunity, there's a hole in the market, but it's also a growing industry, right? You want to make sure that the industry that you're being included in is not on the way out. Like, you're not investing in like a newspaper company or something like that, and like no one's buying newspapers anymore, right? So you actually were like, okay, this is growing. So, rising tide, what's that saying? I suck at saying. You guys, what's the rising tide raises all ships or something like that?
Okay, yeah.
Or does it sink
makes
all?
sense.
Anyway, we're rising.
Rise,
So
rise.
everything rises,
Yeah.
right? Oh, God. My audience knows this about me. I can't. I don't even know why I bother trying.
The effort's there. The intent's there.
The intent is there,
Someone's
but
Googling it somewhere.
yeah, someone's like, Laura's wrong again. But yeah, you pick an industry where you're like, look, even if I do a mediocre job at this, I'll do probably okay, at least at the start before there's competition and stuff like that, right? So you must have been scared though, even though the industry was kind of there and presenting itself as something that was growing. You must have been like, holy shit, like, I'm leaving my structured job, I'm leaving like a guaranteed income, and I'm going into the unknown. Was it like you cut the cord, or did you have a transition period?
I had a bit of a transition period, and I kind of treated this, and it was probably a good thing, like a mini consulting project, because I was used to going from company to company, working on their operations, understanding their business, and so with this, I approached it just like that. And to think right from the end is really intimidating, and so I always suggest like putting together just a whole list, like Excel, write it, whatever you want to do, but just every single thought of all the steps that you need to take in order to get it open, and then just start going through it. And you're going to go through things like the competitor analysis and really like diving into the industry, like, is there an actual need to it? Keep asking why, like, why do we need this?
Yes.
What is it serving? All of those things. And then slowly you get through this checklist, and it comes a point where you have to actually make like a monetary investment, or you have to sign a lease, or you have to look for financing.
And that's probably the scariest moment, maybe,
it's when
for
you
most
have to
people,
jump,
right?
And
Yeah.
same with our franchise partners. That's when they really are like, all right, I'm like taking the leap. And with franchising, thankfully we're there to like catch them and support them. But you need to just kind of almost trick yourself into it. And then you get to that moment, have so much support around you, take the leap and continue forward. But the thing that we get caught up in is ourselves. Like, we get caught up in our own judgments. I can't do this. Like, who am
Imposter
I to own
syndrome.
a wax bar?
Yeah.
Like, what are my friends going to think of me when they come in? And what if it's not good? Like, what if I totally...
And it fails and I have to go back. And
Yeah.
Did you have support by friends and family? Like, were people kind of like, go after it, or did you keep it a secret a little bit?
I did include people, but only so much. So not as much I had like a select group in the details, and then a select group in more of the I'm doing this type thing. But it is, you just keep second guessing yourself. What I knew for sure, and I can literally like feel it to this day, is I just had this gut instinct, and I'm a big gut person, but like I had this feeling that like this was gonna work. Like it had to. It made sense. Everything was adding up, and there wasn't a lot of resistance. I find when I do something and I come with like a ton of resistance, and I'm just like almost like banging my head against a wall trying to push things forward.
Yeah.
Usually it's the wrong thing.
Interesting, because oftentimes you'd think, well, of course there's going to be resistance, but you're not talking about like necessarily like business, challenges, but you're talking about like doors kind of seem to be opening, right?
100%. Like things just kind of seem to be clicking in a way. And when I got into the space that we had built out, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I just really had this feeling of like, okay, like this is so scary, but deep down I knew it was going to work. And I'm a big believer, like we get amazing ideas, and we're only served ideas that are within like our capacity to be able to achieve, right? And so when we have those ideas, instead of like just shifting to them aside and letting your judgments overcome that idea, like what if we just took one step towards it? What if we sent an email?
Are you kind of into like the meditative space or journaling or anything like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the reason why I asked, maybe we'll go down that path a little bit, is because, oftentimes, when we're young, people always say this: trust your gut. Sometimes I'm like, I sit there, my gut's not saying anything. Like she's quiet, and I'm like, hello, like knock, 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 like tell me one way or another.
Yeah.
And I think we've just become so accustomed as a society to like listen to everyone's opinions, and the more podcasts and the more Instagram and the more like we have all this information coming at us, and so I find that it's almost even harder to trust your gut. So taking that time to quiet the noise, to like shut off, and like because it's fucking noisy everywhere. Like really sit with yourself. Maybe it's journaling or meditating and something like that to say like, does this make sense for me? So is that kind of when you found it? Like,
yeah, I mean, mine kind of, yes, and it comes like just this kind of like blah feeling when it's not good, and exciting energy when it is aligned. And I'd say that one of the best things that I can do is like remove the noise just in my mind of all of the doubts that I'd have, and say like, okay, so if I could have anything's possible right now. And I have so much noise. Like I've got all the excuses in the world to not open 10 locations.
Yes.
This next year. Like I had twins a year and a half ago.
Hello, recession. Oh,
exactly.
and that too.
322 days we were closed.
Yeah.
And then, I had twins coming off of COVID, and that next year we opened 5 locations. Like I have so many excuses, but what if I just like clear that all aside and say like, what do I actually want? Like if I could have anything right now and I could do anything that I wanted to, like what would it be that I would want to do?
And for you, growth obviously is very important in that regard.
Yeah.
So even when you started, like, and I also think there's something to saying, even if it doesn't work, I want to look back and say I tried.
100%.
Like that's also a really important thing to say. At the end of the day, I gave it my all, now I have no regrets. So even if that's the motivation of doing it, that kind of gets you through the naysayers, and some of those naysayers are in your mind. Okay, if you don't mind, let me take you back. So we decide we want to start a wax bar. Did you made your financial investment yourself? Did you get partners? What was your thought there?
Yeah, so it was myself.
Okay.
I took everything from consulting.
Yeah.
I'd gone on my own in my own consulting business for a couple years.
Okay, so you were already on your own there. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a slow
that was like
transition.
my mini entrepreneur, and it was a lot safer because I just had clients that
came along with you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then this was really the leap because I put everything into this, and
so through all your savings, like you're like, we're doing this.
We're doing it.
Were you married at the time?
No, I was 25, single.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty aggressive, like 25. Like you're right. I can picture people saying like, do you know what you're doing?
Oh,
do you have a degree in business?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Undergraduate degree or master's, or just at a...
Just an undergraduate.
Okay.
I went to like Dal for Commerce Co-op. And,
okay. And the reason I asked, because you were talking about, like the SWOT analysis and things like that. That's such a business term, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes people who open businesses don't have that. But there's some things that, like, I mean, those things are easily Googleable, but you kind of do them naturally. You might just not call it a SWOT analysis, but you're kind of like, you're looking at the landscape, you're looking at the competitors in the space or people who are there. You were looking at people in the US that were doing it, saying, how can I maybe mimic or imitate this model somewhere else, right? So you're kind of doing those things naturally. Okay, so you get the first place up and running, right? And at what point was it, actually, let's go back. Was it smooth sailing? Like first place just knocked it out of the park?
I mean, sorry, it did really well, but absolutely
not smooth sailing. What were some of the obstacles?
We had to turn over almost our entire staff. Like we hadn't really figured out what is it that makes our culture click. And coming into this industry, all I heard, and it really frustrated me because it was very much a female-dominated industry. All of our employees are female. We have 200 plus employees to date now, and it was this just known as this like catty, high turnover industry.
Interesting.
And I really didn't want that to be associated with the business that I was opening and running, and also with an industry that's so female dominated. And so I, hired my team. I had to turn over probably more than half of them.
Because it did become catty.
It just, it was. I didn't know what it was I was looking for, and I needed to get more clear on like, what's the culture that I want to have?
Out of curiosity, do you think that's because you brought on people who maybe worked at other places, so they brought those bad habits? Or is there something about, I hate to say it, just exclusively women working with women that is just naturally catty? What do you attribute that to?
So that's what I'd heard, and that's what I was like, I'm not available for that.
Yeah.
And once we got our team, and now every location that we open, and we've got a really concrete culture, we have these amazing core values that we like hire off of, we do career conversations off of, and that's allowed us to have an amazing workplace. Are there arguments? Are there issues? 100%. But
so it's not that it's just women, obviously.
It's not just women.
It's very clear that maybe that was just the norm in the industry,
and
right?
it was how people were treated in the industry. They weren't paid well. It was known as like a high turnover where you're paid as an hourly employee versus building a career. And at WAXON, I have people who have been with me since day one. My manager at our first locations, our vice president, and oversees all of our locations across the system. And she's grown with the business. And we have waxologists that started with me day one, and they're still with us. Like, it's about growing careers. And I didn't want to be synonymous with catty females in a business. Like, oh, we can't all work under one
tearing
roof
each other down. What is it? Stealing each other's clients, or more like talking shit behind each other's backs?
I think it was all of the above. You know, and we just leaned into how do we get to the bottom of this and fight fires before they start. How do we be proactive? And
but how do you do that, really? Like, what are some of the tactics? Because obviously, most people, like the real estate industry that I work in, can be very catty. That sounds like it's female exclusive.
No,
it's not. Very, very catty. It's because they kind of feel like your competition, even though you work side by side, and you're kind of always sizing them up and figuring out how are they doing it, and like, if how are they owning that car, wearing those clothes, and how come I'm not having it? And there does unfortunately tend to be something with competition, like, instead of saying to yourself, I'm just gonna build the biggest business, it's like, no, I'm gonna do better by tearing your business down. Right? But when you're in it, it's hard to see, like, how do we truly fix this if it's so synonymous with the industry? So how are you, like, how am I actually, like, obviously you talk to the staff. I'm sure maybe you do one-on-ones or the VP, like top down, but what are some of the actual tactics? Like hiring different people? I don't know.
For sure. I mean, hiring people that are going to be working together well, and we do that by hiring on core values. So like respect, team, ownership, like the ability to adapt and work together are some of the things that we make sure every single person that we hire embodies.
And is that kind of based on gut? And I hate to cut you off. We're just in a hiring frenzy too. So I'm just kind of like excited about this because, you put these things out there on a job post, right? And everyone wants a respectful workplace and certain core values. I find though when you're interviewing people say a lot of things to your face, right? Of course I'm like that, and I'm a team player, and my biggest weakness is that I'm a perfectionist, and like all these things, right, that you hear so often. It's not until that they're actually working with you that you really see someone's true colors. And I think where I have failed perhaps in the past is not letting go of people that I knew were bad for the culture at the start, like fast enough. Like I've gotten rid of them over time, but not like it took too long, and I let them infiltrate the culture too much.
And that goes back to your gut. Like you knew the second it's not the right fit. It's like, they always say, like, hire slow, fire fast. And
yes.
it becomes a bad egg, and it then pollutes the rest of, for us, it's a location and it's the vibe. And if our people are happier at their job, they're going to provide better services to their clients. Like, I truly believe that. And so when we open a new location, for example, like we did on Friday, I kick it off and I talk about all of those things.
Gotcha.
So like at a baseline, we're aligned in what they can expect of us in a workplace. One of them is one-on-ones. Like every week, our manager sits down with every person individually, and it's a combination of reviewing results and a therapy session. And it like truly, like we hire managers on like, you are going to be part therapist, and it's important to this place.
I am not a certified therapist, but I certainly pretend I am one most days, right? We have chairs in our office that we call the therapist chairs, because if you give people an opportunity to kind of like share their life, and it's not to say I'm doing this at the best level, I know I can be doing better.
Yeah.
I can do more one-on-ones. I can make them more frequent. Like I've heard this weekly, and I can't even fathom like where people find the time to do weekly. But obviously it's that important, and you do find over time people start to open up. And I've had staff, like we've talked about career changes, right? And like, what are your goals? And how can I try to help you do that? And the people who have been loyal to you, like you want to help them. You want to help them figure it out. So yes, of course, does that mean now you have to hire again? And that's a pain in the ass. But it's so worth it when you're surrounded by people who are like all committed. And you said that kind of at the start, like everyone is committed. They're working to a goal. They kind of all feel a little ownership, right?
They have ownership. They're like both, motivated by their own incentives, which we incentivize them obviously on their building their own little business within our business, but also on the teams, like collectively together. Over COVID, so we were closed for 322 days, on and off. It was just like a yo-yo, you know, like our industry was very much the one that was chosen to make a statement. And I had 90% of my team come back to work after 322 days. And it's, something I'm most proud of. But going back to, why I started this business to begin with, at first I thought it's a brilliant idea and it's going to fill a space that needs to be filled, and I'll make a lot of money at it, and blah 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 blah. Like those were the initial reasons. What I very quickly realized is like my whole reason is the people. And so it's the women that work for WAXON. It's that every location we open means we're employing 10 to 12 other women that get to come in, work in a great environment that we provide in a caddy industry. And then with franchising, it's a whole other element, because now these are women who've always wanted to own their own business, or not even always. Yeah. Maybe they're empty nesters and all of a sudden are like, I need something more, but like, I'm not going to go and like walk that plank on my own.
Like what you did.
Yeah, like I'm not doing
that is a bigger leap, right? But something about franchising is like, look, I have a partner.
Yeah.
I have someone who's done this and walked this plank before, so to speak. And now I can kind of like follow in their footsteps, but also still have ownership, right?
I still own my own business, but I have all the tools, and I have someone to go to when things get a little more challenging, and someone to show me the way and have the roadmap, and have made all of the mistakes basically before. Like I have made all of the mistakes.
So at the start you said like maybe you didn't hire the correct people, and we had to kind of go back and rehire some people. What were some of the other challenges or mistakes maybe that you made early on in that first location? If you can think back. It's a while ago.
It seems so basic, but like having an accountant from day one is so important. Because you're going to spend so much time doing all the things, trying to find all the receipts and just understand your business.
Just looking at your bank statements, wondering what the fuck is going on. And you're allowed to swear in here. I don't know if you're swear, but like, because I do this too, right? Like every couple months, like I'll take a look at my bank statements and I'm just like, what is happening?
What's going on? Like, what is going on? And so it seems so silly, but that for sure. And in general, like I was very clear, one thing that I did well going into WAXON is understanding like where I needed to lean into support, and making sure I had like the funds to hire those people. So for example, in marketing and branding, like that's not my strong suit. Okay. But in operations and all the policies, procedures, and how the location was going to flow, like I could do that all, like, all day long, and have it be really effective.
That's so smart. So you kind of like knew where your strengths were. And people always say, lean into your strengths, but oftentimes people don't even know where their strengths are, or they think their strengths are not actually their strengths, right? Totally. Like I always thought I was a great operations person because people always kept telling me like, you're organized and you know the rules, but that doesn't actually make me good at it or necessarily like it, right? I actually find myself like I'm much more on the marketing side, not because I come up with a bunch of creative ideas, but I spend a lot of time like worrying about the brand and what people are saying about it and our reputation around it.
Yeah.
That I do think starts from the culture from the inside. Like people can feel that all the way through, right? So I think I've gone down the wrong path many times in my life on that as well. So you figured that out pretty early. So hiring for your weaknesses.
Yeah,
right?
and that's where you're gonna get stuck up as well on actually launching your business, right? Because if you're caught doing something that you're really not strong at, you're like, I can't do this. Like, look, I can't even make a decision on this. And it's like, well, no, because you have no business being in that part. Like, you need to bring the professional in and help you on that side.
But I think most people would look at that and say, maybe this isn't for me.
Yeah.
Like they would give up at the first
Exactly.
kind of like, this is too hard. People always think, especially now, right? Entrepreneurship is so attractive and sexy to everybody, but like the day-to-day is really grueling and mundane at times. Like it's not always grueling, but it can be grueling, but it's mostly kind of boring. Right? Like I hate to say it like that. It's just kind of like the day is going and like you're like another day that we survived, Okay, so what point do you say, I'm gonna open up another one? I'm gonna take on even more risk. What was the decision there?
It was quite soon after, like within, because we opened our second a year and a half after, so probably 6 or 7 months in, the response to our first location was amazing. So behind the scenes, I'm fixing everything. But to everyone else, everyone was, having a really great experience, word of mouth. We had people coming from like Burlington to Toronto to come for a service, and it was really had caught on and had tremendous, PR. So within like the next 6 months, I opened our second location, and then, a year and a half, but 6 months I decided to open our second location. And then following that one, within another year, I opened 2 at the same time that almost bankrupted me and totally closed the entire thing down.
Why? What happened with those 2?
Because I got so I was like, oh, look at me! Like I opened 2 locations. Now I'm going to be 4 corners of Toronto. No
Why
big
2
deal.
at the same time?
Well, that wasn't exactly my design.
Okay, in my head, like you knew.
Build out, like all of the pieces just kind of
came together at the same time. Okay,
and in the worst of ways. And I had 2 locations open that had a slower ramp than my other ones had in the past.
Just because of the location, you think, or because was there more competition coming into the market at that time?
It wasn't as much. Competition was similar. It was more the location. So one, I for sure sacrificed on location. I said this is an average location. It's not the best, but I want to open, so let's just go with this. And
did you kind of go against your gut there?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
It was going back to it was hard. It was so hard. It was one of the hardest leases to negotiate. Like the landlords were just not really great to work with from day one. It was very challenging to get this across the finish line, which now I've known is usually a warning sign for me.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But it was really hard to get down. And ever since, I've never done anything but A+ real estate. And it was the best learning I could have possibly had. But
so now you kind of go back, and that becomes sort of like your best practices, right? Like we go into good locations, and I mean it's something like that obviously you can see would matter a lot. Franchising. Mm-hmm. So at what point are you like, I'm gonna now take on the headache of other business owners as well, because now you're not necessarily in control either, right? Like obviously, as you had different locations, someone is managing those locations, so you've already kind of given up some control. So maybe that was the path forward. But at some point, like franchising, because they could essentially ruin the brand for you as well, and you're not necessarily having as much control. I don't know much about franchising, so maybe you can kind of touch on that.
Yeah, franchising terrified me, even though I came into it and I was like, I'm gonna franchise right away. And but as I understood what is important to my business, which is the quality, is absolutely integral, right? Like you want to come in and receive what we provide, which is the best experience every time in what is an intimate service offering, and people leave raving about our services because of that. And so I was so terrified about not being able to replicate that, because I had done it successfully with these 4, but now to put it in the hands of someone else who I'm just meeting, getting to know, and trying to say like, okay, you're going to be aligned with me in terms of all the ways that you think, and that quality and culture are so important to our business, and you'll do that too. So I went back and forth a million different times on whether I was going to franchise, and then I found someone who was a client of ours that made it seem like it was going to be an easier way to kind of step in and dabble into it.
Like
so
you knew them a little bit already.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was helpful, right? You're not kind of like putting up something on Instagram being like, I'm looking for franchisees and like see who you get, right?
I get, exactly. Yeah. And so it made it a little more approachable. However, I will say, like, diving into franchising, like, there's no putting your toe in. Like, you are in it deep because you have to spend a lot of money on your franchise agreements, all of your documents.
Yes,
like,
I imagine that would be quite an investment. And
huge
like,
investment.
Obviously, you have a lawyer, but for you, like, are you reading these things? Like, I have no clue what is happening, like, and how much.
Unfortunately, I have. But I would fall asleep. Like, I'll give you ours, and you'll just be like, oh.
Okay, so when you buy a pre-construction condo, we sell a lot of pre-cons. It's like, I don't know, 150 pages are the condo docs, and then the actual agreement of purchase and sale is about 56 pages, where a regular home purchase, it's like 8 pages.
Right.
Like, it's completely different, and I have been like, okay, I have to read this through from start to finish. I don't think I've fully ever gotten through because I don't even understand the sentence structure. It's like all the lawyers.
It's legal.
Right?
It's a legal
Yeah,
structure.
it doesn't make any sense. I'm like, this is just an ongoing sentence that doesn't make any sense.
So many ongoing sentences.
Right? Okay, so obviously you put a lot of trust and faith in the legal team.
Mm-hmm.
So you opened up one at a time, one franchise at a time at the start?
Yeah. I opened at one. So we actually opened a couple locations back to back and franchised them. And then I took a pause. And I was like, okay, so this is good, but we still have some work to do. Went back, like, just needed more support. It was taking a lot of our time to support our franchise partners because we didn't want them to feel like they were on their own ever. Like, we wanted them to feel like they were supported. And so we took a pause, started to dive back into, what additional tools we could bring forward. Actually, during COVID, we spent like most of that time, upgrading our systems, just upgrading like our franchise toolkit, so to speak, policies, procedures, training, all of that, so that we could come out of the gates and lean in, knowing that
a great use of time.
Oh my God, it was amazing use of time. Like, we had a lot of it.
Yeah, obviously, because like you're not necessarily running the businesses at that time, so you may as well use it. Because I was going to ask, like, if you're running, like, you have all your own shops, are you actively involved in the day-to-day of those businesses? Or is the way it's structured, you're not like, you're not there every day, you're not dealing with like the day-to-day stuff? Yeah.
We have a manager at every location, and then we have someone who oversees the managers. I would know, like, every Monday we go through all the results across our entire 19 locations, how they're doing, how they're performing, and any things that I might want to reach out or be involved in. And then I have regular updates with our team that oversee the locations. So I get it through there. And then, today I'm in the neighborhood, so I'm going to go drop by, see our franchise partner at York Mills and Leslie, and say hi. And
okay, so I see, because I'm thinking, like, how do you find the time to do all these things? But obviously this is when you grow and expand, which I haven't gotten to, obviously, in my business, where, you just bring on people to do those things. Was delegating hard for you? Was that ever hard?
I'm pretty good at delegating.
Yeah.
I'm not a micromanager. Okay. It takes a bit for me to then lean in and zero in on, like, your area that you're responsible for. And if I am, it's probably because you need me to. Like, it needs support. But typically I've been good at passing the torch along.
Okay. Yeah, you seem like that, because some people, they wouldn't even see the path of growing. They would still stay at the one store and just kind of like put all their efforts into there and make sure that was good. And because you'll never grow. And some people are fine with that, right? But if you can't get over the ability to delegate, I talk to a lot of people when in my coaching, and I'm like, you need to bring on some staff, and they're like, but they're not going to do it right. They're not going to write up the agreement right, or they're not going to respond to my client's email correctly. I'm like, you have to at some point put some trust and faith in other people, and they will mess up, as I'm sure some of your managers have messed up, but most things are not that detrimental. Would you agree with that?
And also, they could do it better than you, potentially. And, like, that's what I've found, is, like, I've hired people who I believe will actually do a better job than I would myself, because they're more detailed, and I'm, like, a bigger thinker, and I'm better on the growth side and the vision of the business and the PR side, like, those types of things, than the manager is on motivating and encouraging our teams, because they came from exactly where those team members were, right? And
they're more maybe specialized, right? When you start hiring for certain things, you don't need necessarily another you.
Yeah.
You just need someone who specializes at this and who gets it and comes in and kind of runs with it. I'm curious for you, at the start, this might sound like a dumb question, but like what resources did you rely on? Like for your own personal education, or were you just like, no resources, trial and error, see what happens, and then I pivot? Or were you kind of like, I'm gonna follow like a textbook or a YouTube channel, or like, you know what I mean? Like I'm just curious, like you're sitting at home and you're like, fuck, this isn't going well, or this isn't going well. Do you start like how to open up franchises? You know what I mean? Like, what's the thought?
Franchising, I leaned into, and it actually is how I met my husband.
Okay.
So he worked for, his brother owned business Freshie, and he started with him early on in the business. And so I met my now brother-in-law through a friend of a friend, and he invited me in to just like understand the ins and outs of franchising. And that was just as I was getting started, kind of dabbling into it. And so I got kind of 2 for 1. I got like a franchise expert, and he introduced me to my
Okay, got you. Okay, well, hey, you know, leaning on your network, people often don't do that, right? Like you have friends and family and colleagues and people that you've just met in the past that like can help you in so many different ways. You just have to ask, right?
Most people just ask the questions and not feel like you should know the answers. Like as an entrepreneur, you have your hands in so many different pieces of the business, and you've started a business, like that's already impressive, or you're about to start a business, like that's amazing, and you should feel proud of that and not ashamed that you're asking like what might sound to you like a dumb question.
Right.
A lot of times the people actually you're asking, like they also don't know the answer. And then you gotta go ask someone else.
We assume everyone else is so much smarter than us, but most people don't know anything about anything.
Yes,
100%. I'm glad you brought up your husband, because that's a great segue. At what point in all of this, you know, let's get married, let's have kids, if you don't mind kind of giving me that background, because I feel like for so many women who are watching and listening, you know, maybe they're focused on the family right now and not on their careers on the business side, or they're maybe in that transition phase and they're thinking like, maybe I need to go back, but I want to be in more control. I didn't like my career before. But they don't always feel supported too, right, to do those things. So maybe you could share your story on that journey a little.
Yeah, so I definitely had relationships in the past that were somewhat intimidated by what I was doing and the big lofty goals, the big hairy goals that I had. Fortunately, meeting Adam, like he's my #1 cheerleader and very supportive as a partner. And I didn't interview for that. Like now I'm like, oh my God, I should have actually been interviewing this. Like, how are you as a dad? Like, are you going to change diapers?
Right.
Like, how are you going to show up? And he truly is a 50-50 partner. And I would be going absolutely insane. I probably would not be here, like sitting in this chair, if I didn't have that. Plus, what I also think is important is surrounding yourself with other means of support. So like, again, going back to the asking the question. So I have 4 kids. 4 and under were like I had them in 4 years because
you have 4 kids, 4 and under. I'm like tired just already hearing it.
I know it's exhausting. I went for the 3rd and got twins. So,
gotcha. Right. You were like just 1 more. Oh, now we have 2. Boys, girls.
So girl, boy, and girl, boy twins.
So that last one was just the way it was supposed to be. Twins, eh?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So life is crazy.
Yeah.
Life is absolutely insane. Do you have, besides your husband, of course,
support.
helping? So you like
so much support.
Right? Okay.
I just wrote an article for Today's Parent about, and it's literally titled like, I have 2 nannies and no shame, like about it, because I believe as women we have this like job that we have to do it all, and we feel like we have to do it all ourselves. And I want people.
There is a lot of shame around getting help for your kids, eh?
And around nannies and just like around, like all of it. And it doesn't have to be like I'm obviously, you know, very privileged and like I have 2 nannies, and I also have 4 kids, but it doesn't need to look like that. Like it can look like meal shares, it can look like carpools, like it just means, and the whole part of my message is around just asking for help. Like not feeling like I'm looking at Susie who lives down the street and she looks like she's got her shit together. Oh wait, no, what you don't see is that she has her in-laws over every night to help prep dinner, and she has babysitters, and she has someone there to help her in the morning getting the kids ready. Like
that's such a good message.
You don't see it.
Yeah, you never do. And it's funny, the way I've kind of taken my social media content is trying to showcase some of that behind the scenes stuff, right? Because if you don't share it, women and men and people, they start to assume that like there's something special about you, that you somehow can manage to have the perfect home. It's always clean. Your kids always look good, and you have the business, and you look like that, like all these things. And it's like, no, half the time, like there's, you know, stains on the walls and like whatever it is, you know, every family has like kind of their own way, their own reality. And so I think it's more important to showcase that stuff so people really know, right?
Yeah.
That's what's inspiring to people.
Yeah, on weekends we don't have any help. And I lean into it because I'm like, you know, I have all this help during the week, and I want to have like that time with the twins and the kids and make sure that I'm like all hands on. But like Saturday, like it was a complete shit show. We were trying to get to a Christmas party. We were an hour late. Like it's just, there's no way that and you have to laugh because.
Do you not feel guilty about it? Is that the way to get through it? Because I think sometimes people put so much pressure on themselves. Like if I'm late, I'm the tardy person. What are my friends saying about me? And maybe they're not saying anything. Maybe they are.
They're probably impressed that you showed up. Like, I mean, really and truly, but like, we have to laugh because Adam and I are both people who, you know, in our careers we're like, do, and we can do this and we can do that. And then when it comes to our life, we're just like, okay, like there's things you just can't control. And like these little kids, 5 and under right now, are out of control. And so one's having a tantrum, the other is, you know, having a tantrum. Like already my 1.5-year-old is like picky about the boots she wears. I'm like, who are you?
Right.
And I can't get out the door, and I'm like,
we're having a meltdown because they can't wear what they want.
But
right.
It's fine, and we just laugh it off. But you can't be too hard on yourselves.
Do you stress out about it? I know you laugh it off generally speaking, or like that's where you try to get to in your mind at least. But do you stress out about like all the balls you're juggling?
For sure. There's times where like the weight is just completely out of control. We opened 2 locations within a week a month ago. And it was like I was close to breaking, you know? You're just like treading water, trying
What
to
does that
survive.
look like for you? Because sometimes people say, well, I don't know if I'm close to breaking because I don't feel like I'm going to cry, or I'm not going to like go in a corner and completely fall apart. But that is sometimes people. Sometimes people, it comes out more in anger, less patience maybe with their kids or their spouse. Some people shut down and they're just like, I'm not emotionally available for any of it, and I'm just kind of going through the motions. What, if you don't mind sharing, like what does yours kind of look like when you're?
It feels like I have had like 15 cups of coffee, so that's like how my body, it's just like this, like, ooh, like we're real high.
Yeah.
And hard to like come down from that. And so I think my energy is higher. So when like I'm around my kids, and it's harder for them to calm down. Like I think pick up on that heightened energy.
Yeah.
I always find if in the morning I try and rush my kids, 1,000,000% it will work in reverse. So today I have somewhere to be. Like I got to get going. I have a meeting, then I got to come here and do this. It's like okay. As soon as I start that, it's like
right. It does the opposite.
They do the opposite.
Yeah.
And so it's just like how, I don't know, but I try and just like bring myself down a bit. And it's not always going to work.
Yeah.
But I'm a big, you know, person who believes in just compartmentalizing and trying to like create boundaries as much as I can in my life. I encourage my team to do the same. And then they'll respect mine and I'll respect theirs.
It's interesting that you bring that up about kind of leadership. I do find when you bring on more people, it kind of forces you to be the better version of yourself. Because if it's just up to you, like I don't have kids, so I don't have to be the better version of myself for other living creatures. And I think oftentimes when people have kids, like they look at their own behavior and say like, well, I don't want them to pick up on this, and I don't want them to sort of have the same habits that I do, so now I need to change my habits, right? But same with the staff at work, right? Yeah. Like you want to show up on time. You want to make sure that you're rested and well prepared for things so that they feel they should be well rested and prepared for things. And it kind of, I don't know, I guess it brings out the best in people, or brings out the best in yourself for sure. Do you like leading people?
I love it.
You love it?
Yeah. That's like that's what gets me.
So it's kind of easy for you, generally speaking.
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me was understanding the importance to let your team in on like the good stuff and some of the hard stuff. I think vulnerability, and I think as women we have, it is just kind of in us to lead vulnerably, or we want to, but we kind of block it down because we feel we need to be the masculine leader. And from my experience, bringing them in on the times that are hard and where, you know, especially during COVID and things like that were more challenging has only brought our team closer together, and they feel even more ownership about, and passion about working towards a common goal.
That's so interesting. I struggle with that very thing because I feel like sometimes I want to be open and honest with the team and let them in and share, but that I don't want to scare people.
No,
Because if things
there's a
aren't
fine
looking,
line. There's
if
a fine
things
line.
aren't looking good, you're not like, hey guys, $0 in the bank account, so
But we're good.
I'll figure out how to pay you next week. You know what I mean?
It's like vulnerable confidence. Like there's a confident vulnerability. That's what it is.
You always want to leave a seed of hope.
100%, for sure.
Right? So there is a balance in that. I always like to leave these podcasts kind of with leaving it open to the guest. And sometimes this is hard for people because they just go back into the bank of like things that we've already talked about.
Yeah.
But because I don't know you and I don't know your journey, I'm sure I've missed something that's absolutely paramount to your success. Maybe how you've gotten here. Maybe it's a personality trait. Maybe it's something that's happened in your life that has given you some thick skin or some perseverance. Is there anything that you'd kind of like to share that might help our viewers and listeners say like, okay, like if she can do it, then so can I?
Yeah, I mean, so I'd say non-negotiables are like a thing that I've adopted, and when you go back to this like high vibe state that I can get into and that we all experience, as women we put ourselves last, right? And as moms we definitely put ourselves last, but as women, like we're always thinking about everyone else around us and our teams and how we're showing up for everyone, and we then don't show up for ourselves.
Yeah.
As a leader and a business owner, your number one obligation is to show up for your team and the people around you, but you can't do that without showing up for yourself. And so I have a very busy schedule and I have like tons of kids and I have all the excuses to put my wellness and my well-being and all of those things last, but I don't. And I think it's really important to find ways to incorporate at least every day something of a downtime for yourself.
And what does that look like for you?
So
not to say it's the same for
Yeah.
everybody, but what does downtime or like me time look like for Lexi?
Me time can be as little as today will likely end up being just what I did this morning, which was like a 2-minute cold plunge. Like that's what I did. And that is what today I've been okay with is gonna sustain me for the day because I'm not gonna have time for anything else. But I made that decision, right? Usually it's some sort of fitness or journaling in the morning. And if that means I have to wake up at like 5 because my son's up at 5:15 and I get 15 minutes, then I get 15 minutes. But I think we think me time needs to look like an hour and a walk and like a big workout class or things like that. But what if it can just look like finding a moment, and it can be 15 minutes today and maybe it's longer the next day, but I believe you cannot show up for your team, for your family, for all the people around you if you're not showing up for yourself first.
Yeah,
And
you kind of got to fill your cup first,
You
and
really
then
do.
whatever's overflowing is what you're capable of giving to everybody else.
And start small.
Yeah, it's interesting. I tend to be naturally the person that is all or nothing.
Yes.
So if I'm going to go to the gym, it's either going to be like my biggest workout of my whole life, or I'm not going at all.
And I used to be like that too.
And I've learned over time that that's so the wrong way to look at it, right? Because then I might only get to the gym once a week. But it's more important to get to the gym, even if it's like 10 minutes or 5. Like sometimes I've like made it downstairs. I'm like, we're doing yoga. And all of a sudden I'm like, nope, not feeling this today, you know? And then that's it. I did my 5 minutes, but at least I kept the habit of doing it because you can so easily fall out of the habit of taking care of yourself and putting yourself first. But also it's more important, I've now realized, like that consistency over time versus being perfect every time.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
You were like that too, eh?
Oh, yeah.
How did you unlearn that?
Like a lot of effort. It was starting to do, during, again, like I feel like I'm talking about COVID so much, but there are things that came out which were positive, and one of those were at-home workouts that are faster. And so I had a newborn, by the way. Yeah, fun fact about me, I had a 3-day-old when I closed all my locations going into COVID. So,
oh my God. So you're like, here I have this person that I need to, care for, money for. The world is blowing up and I might not have a career.
Yeah,
Who knows
we
when.
closed all of our locations and who knows what's next. Like no one knew, right? But during that time, I leaned into like the 15-minute Pilates stuff. And that's when I was like, wait a second. And actually my like results, I was like, oh, I'm still like maintaining my fitness. I'm not completely losing it, and I can actually make this more efficient and be able to feel good about it, and then do longer ones when the time allows.
When the time allows.
Yeah, just leaning into that, I think, helped get me out of it. But I was like you, I was like, I'm either there and I'm in a class and I'm like crushing it, or I'm not going at all, because what's the point?
Yeah, and that is so the wrong way to look at it. So I'm so glad you brought that up. I don't think anyone else in 26, 25 episodes I think we're on today has brought that up. So I really appreciate you sharing that, like really taking that time for yourself, because so few of us do, particularly women, mothers of 4. I mean, I don't even know how you do it all. I didn't know anything about you before coming today. I actually thought that it might have been your staff that was here with me today. Yeah, J-Lo. I saw J-Lo on the email. I was like, J-Lo's coming? Awesome. J-Lo's coming? And I gotta say, I really admire you, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Thank you.
And guys, we will see you next time.